Okay, it's 12 o'clock. And if David is ready, I believe I am. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our presentation on creating momentum in your sphere of influence with David Wilkinson. But first, a little bit about us at SCORE. We are a nationwide nonprofit organization that is an independent part of the Small Business Administration. SCORE provides small businesses with free, confidential business mentoring, both in person and online, as well as educational services such as this webinar. We have 90 volunteers in our SCORE Minnesota division, serving Manatee and Sarasota counties. And our chapter was recognized as District Chapter of the Year for 2022. What we can do for you, no matter what stage of your business that you are in, SCORE is ready to help. If you are in the beginning stages and you have an idea about a business, we can help you through that process. If you are already ready to open your business, then we have somebody that can help with that. We have a brand new website for you to find us at, which is visitscore.org/Minnesota. If you would like to request a mentor or to sign up for one of our great webinars, such as this one with David Wilkinson. And we would not be here if it was not for our SCORE sponsors. We would like to thank our SCORE Minnesota sponsors and community partners, such as the ones that we have highlighted here. Now I believe it is time to introduce our presenter, David Wilkinson, who has been an executive coach for over 23 years, consulting over 250 companies in over 20 countries. And let's see. Take it away, David.
Very good. Thank you so much for having me on this great webinar, and I'm excited about sharing with you something that I was not expecting. So I didn't really have a desire or a thought to publish a book, but I want to share with everyone how it happened because it's quite astounding. And so what took place was I was living in Durban, South Africa. I lived in South Africa for 7 years. And what happened was, while I was there, I was coaching 6 different companies in a day. So I was coaching, each client was about 2 hours long, so it was a 12-hour coaching day. And I was happy, I found my flow, and I was just jotting some notes down at the end of the day. And what happened was I started kind of brainstorming, and I was writing down different thoughts. And the next thing you know, I had 7 different chapters of a book. And I kind of said, well, that's interesting. That looks like a book that I'm going to write. And I kind of threw a declarative statement out there because I just started my company from scratch. And I said, you know what? I need one more client. If I got one more client, I would actually have enough money to actually take the time and write a book. And so I just kind of threw it out there. Well, that was on a Thursday evening. On Friday morning, I was invited out to dinner from a gentleman I met one time at a picnic. And we were sitting there and we were talking, and I knew he was not supposed to be a client by the end of the meal. And I'm one of those people that kind of wears your emotion on your sleeve, and he could tell that I was a little bit down. And he said, David, what's wrong? And I said, well, I really thought you were supposed to be a client, but I know that's not the best fit for you. And well, I was going to write a book if you became a client. And he said, well, what's the book about? And I said, well, I've got 7 chapter titles, but I don't have the title of the book. And he said, well, what are the 7 chapter titles? And I said, well, this is what it is. And he said, well, David, you're supposed to write this book. And he said, you know, how much money does the client pay? And I said, 4,000 rand. And he says, well, I'm going to pay you for 6 months for you to write your book. And I said, you mean you're going to be an investor in the book? He says, no, I'm going to give you money every month because you're supposed to write the book. So it's kind of a unique story. Most people don't get paid from someone else that they've met once
David?
to write a book. So what happened was I started to talk to all of my clients and shared with them about, you know, about writing a book. And I started saying to them, listen, I'm going to write a book. And I said, I'm going to get thousands of copies sold before I even have the title. And they said, well, David, how many books have you written in your life? And I said, zero. And they said, do you have a publisher? And I said, no. And they said, okay, how is this going to happen? And I said, I don't know. But I know it's a book about momentum, and I'm going to be talking to everybody about it because I'm excited about it. And what happened was I was sitting across at a barbecue from a client, and his sister was sitting next to me, and we were talking, and she said, what are you working on? And I said, no, I'm writing a book. And she said, what's the title? And I said, I don't know. She said, what's it about? And I read her off the 7 different chapter titles, and she said, I'll buy 5,500 copies. Now, if you do a little bit of research.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so what happened at that point was I started asking different questions about business at that point. And I said, what does it look like? What does it look like for you to create momentum? And the more that I asked about the principles, and the greater the impact it was. And so what happened was this book went all over the world and got shipped out. And it was a very humbling experience. So when I've talked to different people, around the world, when I provide coaching for them, I ask them about where are the areas that they have momentum in? What does it look like for them? And it's different for everyone, isn't it? Because one person may have a lot of momentum in one area, and then some other people don't have any momentum in the same area. And so it's different for every person. So what I want to talk to you today is how to actually understand and use the law of momentum in your organization, regardless of whether or not it's a for-profit or nonprofit organization. It's how to use that law on a consistent basis. Now, if I see that a business person it has luck, so to speak, coincidences, epiphanies that happen on a continual basis, and they just seem to, when they even go to the grocery store or the gas station, or they're at a networking event, they are bumping into the right people. If that happens one time, I say that that's luck. If it's twice, it's a coincidence. But if it happens 3 times or 4 times or 20 times or 30 times, it means that it's a repeatable pattern. And that's what the law of momentum teaches, that once you find your flow in business and you know about your product, your service, and you're passionate about it, and you love what you do, you love helping people, and you know that you're the right person at the right time, in the right place, you always intersect with the right person. And that is what the law of momentum is all about. So my name is David Wilkinson. I love coaching people. I have 2 really different passions. I love coaching organizations, and then we have a capital company. We love help them with capital. So they're looking for debt or equity raises. And those are the things that I love. That's the momentum that I have. And I constantly bump into the right people that are looking for coaching or capital. Just last night, I was up in St. Pete, and I was there at a networking event, and the first 3 people I met all said, oh, David, I'm so glad you came here, because what you have to offer is exactly what we're looking for. It's easy when you're in the flow, isn't it? When you have the momentum and everything's going your way. But you know what? When you're out of the flow and you don't understand about the law of momentum, it's like treading water, isn't it? It's like trying to walk up a river. And by the time we're done today, I'm hoping that you take away some key points that you can use in your company, and that you can have that repeatable pattern of ease in growing your organization. So creating momentum in your sphere of influence, becoming an entrepreneurial vortex, is the first chapter of the book. It's the first workshop session. When you think about creating momentum in your sphere, it means that you have to know where your sphere is. We immigrated down from Colorado back in December 2020 down to Sarasota, Florida. And man, I can't tell you how easy it is to do business in Sarasota and the surrounding counties. And the reason why that is this is my sphere of influence. I seem to bump into all the right people. I love living here. I love the people here. I love the culture. And therefore, what used to be my sphere of influence in Colorado shifted to where it no longer was my sphere of influence. So some people, they were born in their parents' house where they grew up, and they lived and died in that house, and it's everything to them, and they love where they live, and they're near family, and that's their sphere of influence. And when they go away to vacation, guess what they say? I can't wait to go home, because it's most who they are. Other people have a sphere that might be just their county or their state or their nation or maybe the globe. But your sphere makes you feel most at home, and your business thrives naturally because you're the right person in the right place. And we're going to talk about in a couple slides about what does it mean to become an entrepreneurial vortex so that those things happen to you on a naturally occurring basis. So how do you create and maintain momentum? So I love this quote: motivation is why you change, momentum is the how. I don't know about you, but there's been different seasons in my life where I had to use a lot of coffee to get through my day. It was just difficult. I was in a difficult season, or I wasn't in the right place, and I wasn't the right time, right person in the right time. And maybe I didn't really believe in my company or my products and my services. So it was just a job. And that's hard to create momentum when you don't feel like you're in a good space. One of the truths about the law of momentum is really your passion about what you do, your passion about your product, your service, your company, because it's really hard to create momentum in something that you really can't stand. I say this all the time. If you're miserable with your business, it's impossible to create momentum. Momentum flows out of a place of having the motivation to grow something because you truly care about it. And I've met people in for-profits and nonprofits, education and government, and they all have different types of momentum, don't they? I remember I've met numerous people in the government that have so much momentum. I just met one last night, and he's the consultant to the government. He says when they get stuck, they call me up, me and my team show up, and we come up with brand new ideas that they can solve problems. He has momentum with communicating to government officials and helping them to be innovative. We all have different types of momentum. So when you have a lot of momentum, it means that you're using a law that you can predict the trajectory of your growth of your business. I don't know about you, but how many times have you met someone that's kind of on the hockey stick curve? They're just exponentially growing their business, and they love what they're doing. And it almost feels like everyone they run into needs what they have. And you say, wow, what a lucky person, or what a blessed person, or that person's amazing. Okay, they created and are maintaining that momentum. They're getting the ball up and over the tipping point because it's working for them, because they're creating the right amount of momentum, the right type of momentum, and they're maintaining it. But what I find, which is kind of ironic, is the amount of people that find you that are not happy with your momentum. I would love it that everybody in your personal and professional life would say, David, way to go. We're so happy that you're killing it. We're so happy that you're, helping all these people. But you know what? You seem to bump into people when you have a lot of momentum, of people that don't appreciate that momentum. And I call those people sapsuckers. It's almost like going up to Maine, and you're there and you want some syrup, and what do? They drill a hole in the tree and they take the sap out, the lifeblood of the tree, right, to get the great maple syrup. Well, I kind of call that sap. I call that what every person is, that they have momentum. And people find you when you have a lot of momentum, and they want to take, sometimes not purposefully, but it's almost like an invisible vacuum cleaner. And you know what I'm talking about. It's a person you bump into at the mall, or it's a person you bump into at grocery shopping, and you ask them how they're doing, and there's a whole bunch of problems, and the next thing you know, you feel really exhausted from a 5-minute conversation. And what I tell people is, before you do something in business, before you go to a networking event, make sure that you turn your cell phone off. Because I find that before something really spectacular is about to happen with momentum, that I will get inundated by distractions through technology that can sap my momentum. So when you're building and creating momentum, the most important thing you can do is to protect that by deflecting others and deflecting problems away from what you're doing, so that when you're accomplishing something, you're focused at it and you can take that momentum and really kick that in. Now, the declarative statements that people make over their organization, people call them different things. They call them their affirmations, right? It's the statements you write down of what you really want to accomplish in the next quarter or over this next year. And remember, when you think about New Year's resolutions, what is it? Over 80% don't come true because nobody writes them down and repeats them on a daily basis. And that's true with declarative statements about your personal and professional life with momentum. You need to be clear with where you're going and what you're doing. So when somebody says, David, what do you want to do this year with coaching or capital? I know in my mind with my declarative statements what I'm going to be accomplishing because I keep them on a regular basis in the forefront. So my encouragement is, number one, we're going to talk about creating and maintaining momentum. Number two, when you have a lot of momentum and you're about to do something significant with your organization, protect that momentum. And number three, be very clear about the declarative statements that you want to accomplish in 2023. This is kind of just what momentum actually looks like, and I have this kind of as a formula: M plus C plus O equals V, which is magnitude plus complexity plus obstacles equal velocity. So let's talk about a brand new startup idea. I was talking to a gentleman last night and he said, David, I've got some really brilliant ideas. I don't know what to do with them. And then he told me one of them. It really was brilliant. I've never heard of anything like it. And I said, this is great. And I helped him come up with a name for this product. And it was just a ball. And I said, this has got a lot of traction to it. And I said, when do you want to launch this? He said, sometime over the next 5 to 10 years. And I said, it'll be somebody else's idea over that time. When can you launch it now? And what this is magnitude is the size of your goal. So when somebody says, I've got a small goal, I can pretty much do it by myself and I can accomplish it over the next 2 or 3 weeks, that doesn't take a lot of momentum. But if you say, listen, I want to go to South Africa and I want to create a company there, and I want to, have a brand new product that I've never done before, and this is a huge, huge goal that you have, then it takes a lot of effort and time to get the size of what you're trying to do up and over that tipping point that you can actually accomplish it. So the first one is it a small, medium, or large size goal that you have for your organization? Number two is complexity. That is the ease of advancement. If somebody comes to me and says, David, I want to start up a new tech company, or I want to get this, or I want to do this, I start to ask them a couple questions to try to find out, is what they're doing, is it a circle, is it a square, or is it a triangle? In other words, how complex is the company or the product or service that they're trying to accomplish? One of the areas that I found quite interesting, especially in Tampa, which has got so many tech startups. There's a ton of tech companies in Florida and Miami and so many different places. And what I love doing is I love to ask somebody, can you give me your pitch about your tech company? And at least sometimes 50 to 80% of the times, the person that's really passionate about what they're doing, they're trying to create a solution to a problem that hasn't happened yet. And so I asked the question, man, this is brilliant. I didn't even know this problem existed. How many people have you talked to about the complexity of this solution that you're creating? Is there a true problem in the marketplace? So the complexity of your company, the complexity of a product or service, if it's extremely complex, it makes it more difficult to get your momentum up and over the tipping point because it's a really complex. So if you have to go through government channels, the SEC or the FCC or the DEA or all, USDA, well, whatever you're doing, if it has to do with the government, it usually makes it a lot more complex. If you're trying to hit more than one target audience, it creates complexity. So when somebody says to me, David, oh, my product is for everyone, it usually means it's for no one. So they have to narrow that down to bring it to the ease of advancement. How can we make this a circle that we can get it up and over the tipping point? Number 3 is the obstacles. The obstacles are the amount of challenges that you have outside the organization, outside your product, outside of your service that hinders the growth. It hinders you from moving forward. So, many companies, they're not looking for profitability in the first 3 to 5 years because they know the amount of obstacles, the amount of challenges externally with patents, with IP, with going through clinical trials, with getting new donors for their organization. There's so many obstacles that are in their way. That means they have to have more momentum, more perseverance, more passion in order for them to get their ball up and over the tipping point. I've had the pleasure of starting over 20 different companies in my life. 9 of those were in South Africa. Some of them were easy. The size of the goal was small, it was round, there was no obstacles, and it went up, open, over, and the next thing you know, I had all this momentum, and it was a ball. And I really enjoyed it. Other times, the size of the goal was massive. It was for nations, and it was extremely complex. And there were so many obstacles that it took years for a breakthrough. And you know what happens is the length of time that it takes you to go up and over the tipping point is where you can burn out. So if you are trying to do something and it's taking you longer than what you expected, and it's harder than what you expected, it's costing you more money than what you're expecting, and you can't get the funding or the donors, and it's almost like you take 1 step forward and 5 step backs because of the complexity and because of the obstacles. That means that the rate of your speed slows down. Because you can't go fast with a large goal that's really complex, that has a lot of obstacles, because even a small pebble in front of a large boulder will stop it dead in its tracks. So your velocity is your rate of speed in which you get what you're working on, your project, a relationship, it could be anything, up and over that tipping point. Now, once you get that ball up and over the tipping point and it's on the other side, guess what happens? It has its own momentum, and you're going, and you're moving forward, and you're excited about what you're doing, and you seem to find all these new partnerships, and you just, if you're a nonprofit, donors come out of the woodwork, and you have all these people that want to sponsor your next banquet. If you're for-profit, you get sometimes so many clients, you don't know what to do, and now you got to hire people. But on the other side, it's so amazing, and it's so worthwhile. I'd love to tell you that that's the end, that once the ball gets up and over the tipping point, from that point forward, it's all easy and downhill. But you don't know, but there's another tipping point that you have to go over. It's the phases of business. So if you say, well, David, I'm getting up and over my business and now I've made $100,000, guess what? Your next benchmark is $500,000, it's $1 million, it's 10 million, it's 100 million. There's always another ball that needs to go up and over that gives you all that momentum. So your velocity is the rate of speed in which you as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, as the executive director, with your team, with your board, that you get this up and over the tipping point as quickly as possible. And that's the amount of time that it takes you. As a positive person, as a person that has their cup half full, I have almost always underestimated the amount of time, effort, and money it takes to start a new project, to start a new partnership, to start a new company, to start a new product or service. I always say it's going to take shorter with less money, and it's going to be easier, and it never is. Every once in a while, you find that flow where the magnitude and the complexity and the obstacles all seem irrelevant to you because you say, you know what? I'm just in the flow. I've found the law of momentum. I'm using that on a regular basis, and look at everything that's happening to me. And that's where your sweet spot is. You know, if you play tennis or golf, and you're not in a great place, what happens? You slice the ball. You hit the tennis ball on the edge of your racket, and it vibrates terrible. But what happens when you hit the golf ball in the sweet spot, the tennis ball in the sweet spot? What happens when that sweet spot is hit over and over and over? How does that make you feel? You know, when I first started my first couple companies, it was in Atlanta, Georgia. And nobody said to me, you know, David, the law of momentum is going to kick in here, and here's how you're going to use it. I didn't know about the law of momentum. I happened to fall into it. It was more intuitive for me, and it wasn't until after I wrote the book that I realized, wait a second, this is a formula that anyone can use at any time, in any country. It is a universal law. It's a universal principle. So let's talk a little bit about some definitions. And here's the first one straight out of the book, The Entrepreneurial Vortex. So it's after momentum has reached a point of critical mass, everywhere this person is found, change, confusion, chaos, and creativity will be there. So if the process or movement gains momentum, it keeps developing or happening more quickly and keeps becoming less likely to stop. You know, what's really exciting about creating momentum is that once you reach that point of critical mass, and once you're really excited about what you're doing, you become unstoppable. And becoming unstoppable in the marketplace means that wherever you go, especially to networking events, you will find the right people because you're the right person and you connect with those. And it becomes easier to keep that momentum going. So how do you create momentum? How do you go from no momentum to full momentum? And you know, there's kind of two sides to this. One's the positive side, one's the negative side. The negative side is I found just as powerful as the positive side. When you're in a really bad place and you've reached your 100% tipping point of irritation, of frustration, and you say, I don't want to do this anymore, and you make a declarative statement in 100% frustration, it is shocking how quickly your life will change at that moment. For instance, I remember when I was living in a place called White River, it was near Nelspruit in South Africa. And one of the things, unlike today, but back then, many years ago, I hated heat and humidity. I didn't like big bugs. And it was something that just drove me nuts. And I didn't like all the sweating and all the constant shower. And one day, it was September. That's it's opposite on the spectrum there. So if it's winter here, it's summer there. And it was September. It was getting really hot. And I remember I woke up one morning and I went outside and I was just drenched with sweat within the first minute. And I said, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to live in Johannesburg where it's dry and it's cooler, and I want to live somewhere for free. And I just spoke it out in utter frustration. And what happened was I got a client that month that happened to have a very beautiful mansion in Johannesburg overlooking the city. And we started talking, and he said, David, I've got a problem. I've got a whole bunch of people living in my house and they won't get out. And the government won't do anything. The police won't do anything. And I said to him, I said, you know what? If we actually brainstorm together and we get the right momentum, we'll get everybody out of your house. But I have a question for you. If we create momentum for this, would you allow me and my family to live there for free for a season until I start my company up in Johannesburg? Would you be open to that? And he laughed. He said, David, that'll never happen. I've tried like 4 times. The government won't listen to me. It'll never happen. I said, no. If I can help you do this and we create momentum and they all get out, would you let us live there for a few months? And he said, I won't even charge you anything, David. I said, okay. I said, go back to court. Go turn in your file. Go turn in the paperwork once again. And that's what he did. He did that in November. And instead of the judge throwing it out for the 5th time, he found a sentence that he liked. And he said to the client, you know what? We're going to send the police today and we're going to get everybody out of your house. And my family moved in by Christmas that year. And we had a place to stay for 7 months in a mansion for free. So that happens sometimes when you're really frustrated. The positive is when you have a whole bunch of momentum behind you and you're really excited about something and you speak that declarative statement because you are in a great place. It happens more quickly. It's really your personal energy that you're expounding, you're using to create momentum. And that means that there has to be alignment. If there's not alignment, it doesn't happen. So for instance, I ask people all the time, I said, tell me about yourself. And sometimes a person will start telling me about their family and how much their family means to them, or their kids, or their wife, or their husband, and they'll talk about this. Or sometimes they'll talk about fishing, and they love being on their boat, and they go fishing as many times a week as they can. Or another person starts talking about their business or businesses, or what they're doing with their organization. And you have another person that talks about food, and they have all this momentum towards food, and everybody always wants to take this person out to eat. So when I talk to a person in an organization and I say, tell me about who you are and tell me about the organization, their thoughts about what they do, if there's not alignment with their emotions, if there's not alignment with their words, there won't be alignment with their actions. And that's kind of my next point here, is that epiphanies take place. And in the definition of this epiphany, it's you're the right person, at the right place, at the right time, with the right organization, which is your products and services, and you connect with the right person who needs them. That is a true epiphany. And you can cultivate your life to have those on a daily basis. I had 3 epiphanies last night at a networking event. It was a perfect interaction with the people that I was looking for. But here's what that means. When you think about your organization, there must be feelings that align to that. And your actions must align with your thoughts and feelings to prove to you that your momentum flows with your organization. Because otherwise, if you say, I can't wait to leave my organization so I can be off for the weekend, and you don't even think about your organization over the weekend, and it's a trudge to go back to the organization on Monday morning, you're probably not going to have a lot of momentum with that. But when you say, oh, David, you know what? I have all these brand new ideas that pop into my head on a Saturday morning, on a Sunday afternoon. Man, I'm so excited. I can't wait to get back to what I'm doing to help people on Monday morning. Oh yeah, I've got my schedule full. I've got all these actions that I'm taking. That means that the most important part about creating momentum above everything else are your desires. And that's the most important part about what I'm sharing with you today, is that when your desire for your organization and the people that you serve is bigger than who you are, it means that your thoughts, feelings, and actions will align with your desires. There's no disconnect. There's no misalignment. And that means that you will be able to use the law of momentum each and every day of your life, and you'll see the results. There's nothing that can happen more quickly to sabotage a person's success than if their desire is not in alignment with their life. Everything that you do must be in alignment with your desires. You know, I'll never forget how many times that I fly on Delta, which is my favorite airline. I grew up in Atlanta, and I'll be talking to someone, and they will say to me, you know, David, you told me you're executive coach, but I can't seem to find the sweet spot of my life. And I always ask them the same momentum universal question. If you had $100 million in your bank account today, that you never had to work again, and it was all tax-free, what would you do with your life? It's amazing how quickly there will be a beautiful dream that pops out of that person's mouth to tell them what they really are called to do. I've helped people all over the world to find their niche, to find where momentum works for them. It's amazing how many times there's this thought that I need a lot of money before I can do what I'm really called to do. And that's not the truth about momentum. You can start something from scratch in the evenings, on weekends. Sometimes just take a couple weeks off on vacation and start something new, something that you're passionate about. And that's the momentum declaration that we speak over people, that you are the creator of your own momentum. I'd love to say I could come and wave a magic wand over you in a mastermind group and you have 100% momentum for the rest of your life. But until each person takes responsibility to be a creator of their own momentum, it never works. So first, you're the creator of your own momentum. You're responsible for all of your own results, regardless of where you live or what business you're in or what personality you have or what education you have or may not have. You're responsible for all your results. You are the cause for your desires to be achieved in your life with the organization that you're in and the people that you surround yourself. And today, you could choose to become an entrepreneurial vortex. It's been a pleasure for me to share with you about my passion about creating momentum and about how to use this law. There's a lot more principles I could have shared, and it's extremely practical, but it was an honor to share with you the passion of my heart of how to create momentum in your sphere of influence to become an entrepreneurial vortex, to serve the people with your products and services in your life. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, David. Let's open it up for questions and answers. And just a second here. Let's see if any participants do have questions. If you could type those into the chat box, David would be happy to get those answered for you. And just a reminder, we have a brand new website, which is you can visit us at score.org/Minnesota, where you can request a mentor or sign up for another webinar. And I would like to thank all of our attendees today for learning more about creating momentum in your sphere of influence. And let's see if we have questions. I see one thing in. All right, we have something from Donna.
Yes, Donna, great question. You know, I say to people that all truth has a ring to it. It rings really true or really false or somewhere in neutral, right? When somebody says they're going to make $10 million tomorrow, and you ask them, do you have a company? And they say no. And then you say, well, how are you going to make the 10 million? They're like, no, I'm expecting to just make $10 million. It rings false, doesn't it? It makes it where people are like, well, you just made that up. That's not a declarative statement. A declarative statement is something that is short and to the point, something that you believe in with all your heart for your company. So it's not something that you're hoping is going to happen one day, but the chance of it is zero, and you're going to make a declarative statement because it's just the right thing to do. It's that you're making declarative statements that you believe in. And so when I say to people, you know, how does your declarative statement over your organization, how does that ring to you? And the person says, no, it rings neutral. It probably means they turned it into a paragraph. So it's not a declarative paragraph. It's a declarative statement. So keep it short and sweet and to the point. And that way you can make it ring true. And then you can see that happening. You know, I remember I wrote down in February 2013. I was living in South Africa at the time. I had a terrible ulcer. I was really frustrated, and I kind of wrote a letter to myself. I was frustrated in my life, and I say, you know what, this is really frustrating for me, and I think I want to move back to the US. Yeah, but you know what? I want a company to pay me $10,000 a month, and that's how I know where I'm going to live. And I wrote down literally a whole letter to myself about what I really want my life to look like. And guess what happened? By the following year, April, I was sitting at a table with some people, and there was a really nice business lady there. And she said, David, what do you do? And I said, no, I'm an executive coach. We do business consulting. And she said, really? She goes, my husband needs that. He needs what you have. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, does he believe that, or is it just you? And she goes, no, I'm going to tell him all about you. And the next thing you know, I got hired for $10,000 a month to coach a gentleman that had 6 different businesses selling mattresses. And you know what? I completely forgot all about my letter. And I had moved to Chicago. I was there for 4 months, and I found an old journal, and my letter fell out. And I opened it up, and I read about my life that I was living in Chicago that I had written down almost 2 years earlier. So when you make a declarative statement, make sure it's something that you really want. It's short, sweet, and to the point. And and then see what's going to take place and see how you can use the law of momentum to cause your declarative statements to come true. So there's lots of funding options right now for businesses. Obviously not for nonprofits. That's another conversation about raising funds. But when it comes to funding, it's really easy to get funding today, much easier in the last 2 years. So I mean, I talked to 5 people a couple of days ago. They all met the criteria for funding. So it could be debt or equity or line of credit. Short-term loans. We have 0% loans. So those are the kind of things that we love working with people about. And it's just finding people that want to take capital and grow their momentum with their organization to scale it up to help more people. Those are the kind of people that we like to help. Thank you for asking. Oh, that's a great question. How do you handle multiple declarative statements? So here's one of the curses about being an entrepreneur, right? If you're a true entrepreneur in your heart, you know, and I know, that you can't do just one thing. I don't really find entrepreneurs that do one thing really well, but they can do 3 things really well. Sometimes when they've got their flow, they can do 10 things really well. But what happens if you've got numerous companies? What happens if you have numerous products or numerous passions in your life? So one of the secrets about anytime you start up any project, a nonprofit, a for-profit, whenever you start up something, you guard your momentum from being diversified. This is a very important point. The failure rate of starting up something new is so high for entrepreneurs because they're trying to do too many things at the same time. So if I have 100% momentum and I'm ready to get this ball up and over the tipping point and I'm really excited about it, and I decide I'm going to start 2 things at one time, I divide my momentum in half. When I do that, I decrease my potential for success in half because I'm not putting all of my momentum towards starting up something. So what I tell people is make sure you have the ball up and over the tipping point first with your first idea, your first project, your first company, product, service. Okay, once it goes over the tipping point, now guess what? You have all this momentum here. Then you can use the downhill momentum to start up your next project because you can maintain the first momentum. So here's how I handle multiple declarative statements. First, make it all about what you really want to do. Get it successful up and over the tipping point, then go to your next set of declarative statements. And that's what you want to do. And then you can start your second thing. Don't try to start 2 balls in 2 areas with 2 companies and 2 products and services and try to get them up and over. They usually both fail. So that's how I would handle multiple declarative statements.
And David, Isabel would like to know how they could contact you.
So I believe Diane has all of my contact information. I'm very careful with breaking protocol, and I don't do that. So, if you would like to get in touch with me, please contact Leola or Diane, and that way you can get in touch with me.
Okay, thank you so much. And any other questions for David while we just have a few minutes left?
They probably want to know, how has my momentum not worked? Because that would be a question I have. Well, David, if you started over 20 companies, how many of them, did they all work? No, they didn't all work. I had 3 really big failures where there was anti-momentum and there was huge collateral damage, and it took me a long time to get over because I really care about, what happens if it doesn't work. So, many times you don't know in the beginning days whether or not something is going to work in the end. What I have found is many times it wasn't because I was smarter or faster. It wasn't because the idea was better or that I had a better team. It was because I said, no matter what, I'm not willing to fail and have the regret of not doing it. So if you would say, well, David, how did you make some of these companies successful? I'm here to tell you, I just persevered through the complexity, the size, and the obstacles. I said, I'm not going to give up. And I have found that belief is more powerful than some of my own clients had about themselves. Is I would all of a sudden say, Amy, I believe in you. And she's like, well, what do you mean you believe in me? I'm like, well, you're my client. I believe in you. And she's like, I think you have more belief than I do in me. And I'm like, is that okay with you? Is it okay that I have so much momentum? I'm putting 100% behind you. You're not going to fail. I won't let you fail. Let's go. Let's go get it done. And all of a sudden things got broken through in her life and all this momentum happened because I believed the best about her and that she was the right person doing what she's doing. Does it fail sometimes? What is failure? In my mind, failure doesn't mean you close the doors. Failure means you didn't learn anything along the way to improve what you're doing for the future. Failure doesn't mean stopping something if it hasn't worked so long and you've sacrificed enough and you gave it a deadline and say, I can't keep doing this. That's not failure. Failure is giving up when you weren't supposed to. That's failure. It's not, well, David, what if the company went bankrupt? Well, what if the company went bankrupt? What if the relationship ended? Okay, things end, but that doesn't mean that it failed. It's how did you end it with integrity? So, to be honest with you, it's some of the most painful moments in my life when something didn't work when I really believed it would. I learned the greatest lessons of my life during that season. And I brought those into my next organization, my next client, the next person that I served. I was able to help them with a secret that I learned when I didn't have momentum and it wasn't big enough of momentum. And I might not have been the right person, but I thought I was. And it didn't end well. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that again. And then you can use that secret to help other people.
That's great. You have a few compliments there in the chat box. Let's see. And do we have anything else?
I would say one of the questions that I would want to ask myself if I was in the chat is, David, what's one of your biggest success stories with coaching? Meaning, what did it look like when there was anti-momentum? So her name is Delian Mulder, and she was in our coaching program for 73 months. And when I met her, she was ready to close her company. She had a mattress company in White River, South Africa, and her parents started it 50 years earlier, and she was burnt out. She was ready to close the company, and she wanted to get an RV and go live in the mountains and be a hermit and never talk to people again, live off the grid. And so I said, okay, so she hired me to help close the company. So the first thing I did is I took her out for lunch, and then I took her to go look at trucks and go look at RVs, and we walked through them. I was calling her bluff. I wanted to see, was she really serious? And by the time we were done and we got the budget, I said, Delian, do you want to really close your business, or would you like a way to revive it? And she said, David, I don't really want to close it. I just don't like it. And if we can fix that,
I'll grow the company. So over the next 73 months, she was only making $100,000 a year selling mattresses in South Africa. And what happened was, over the next 73 months, we got her passion back again. We got the right team. She opened 2 more locations, which had never happened in 50 years. And at the end, she was making $100,000 a month. And she now lives in a cabin in the woods, and she's off the grid. And she just sent me a birthday Facebook message saying, David, thank you so much for coaching me because I'm living my dream at 63 years old. And she's retired because of our coaching. Because here's what I believe. I believe when you use the law of momentum, you can help any person at any time with any problem because you believe the best about them. That's what I'm really passionate about.
Love that story.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, I just turned 50 in Florida. I was so happy. I'm happy to be here. So somebody's going to say, oh, but David, what was your worst coaching failure? That's an easy one. His name is Ken, and he was in Chicago. And Ken was right around 68. In fact, the majority of my clients for the last 23 years have typically been over 40. There's a lot of millennials and Gen Zs now that are interested in coaching. So that's been an interesting twist, and care deeply about them. But when I was coaching Ken, what happened was we came up with a brand new strategy that he's never heard of before. It was a brand new idea, and he wanted to use the idea over the next 90 days, and he hired me as a coach to help him grow his company. And it failed miserably. And I got to the end of the 90 days, and I couldn't believe it because it was such a great idea. And he seemed to be the right person. And I said to him, Ken, I don't understand. We did everything right. This should have exploded. And he said, oh, David, it was never about the business. And I said, what do you mean? You hired me to help you grow the company and I failed you miserably. He said, no, actually you didn't. See, what you didn't know is the very first session, you got out a napkin and you talked to me about DISC, and you overlaid the 4 personalities with the 5 love languages, and you just spent like 5 minutes on it. And I took it home and I shared it with my wife because we've been in counseling for 36 months and we were doing horrible as a married couple. And I actually implemented it that day. And in the last 90 days, we have been the best we've ever been in our marriage in the last 2 decades. And he gave me a big hug. He said, David, I thought it was about the business. It was actually about my marriage. And 3 months later, he had a heart attack and died. The reason why the coaching didn't work in the business is because he didn't really care that much about the business, but he thought he did. It was actually about his wife. And in the end, you never know as a coach how you're helping someone to better themselves. And you're just a servant. You're there to serve people, just like we all are, with our products and services at the best rate we can give them in order to make an impact and sleep good every single night.
And we do have on there, how many times a day should we declare our declarative statements? How do you make that a habit?
That's a good question. I would say, how far away are you from believing them? So if a person doesn't believe in their statements, it's probably going to take a lot more times. I know a lot of clients, they have sticky notes and they put on their mirror. And every time they get ready in the morning or when they're brushing their teeth at night, they look at their declarative statements and they say them, as they're brushing their teeth or after they get out of the shower, whatever, they see that. Some people have it where it comes up on their Google Calendar every morning, where it just pops in, remember your declarative statements. And I say to people, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you feel as you say the statements. Don't say it cognitively. You need to say it holistically, because there isn't any power with you making a statement that you don't feel strongly about. So make sure before you get in a space, don't be in a rush and do it. Take a little bit of time, feel your statement, make your declarative statement, and then make it come to pass.
And David, we need to know if you're able to share what your declaration statement is.
So I guess that would be a question of on the relationships of my life. Is it over the companies that I have? Is it about where I live in Florida? Is it about what I'm going to do in my 50th year on this earth? I have a lot of different declarative statements that I have written down. So that would be a little bit of a challenge. But you know what? I guess that means you're going to have to actually, get in touch with Diane, and we're going to have a one-on-one, and I'll have to tell you personally about that because it's now 12:59, and I am never late with what I do.
And just to let people know, Diane did put her her SCORE email address in the chat box, if you did see that in there. So there is a way to contact Diane who can get you in contact with David.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you very much.
David, I can't thank you enough. I had such a great afternoon, and thank you for everybody bearing with us through my technical difficulties. I'm definitely still learning, and we finally got the audio sorted out. It was a little crackly here and there, but it got much, much better. So have a great afternoon. Thank you again.
Thank you.